Chris deCarlo is a philosopher of science and ethics whose interests in cognitive evolution have taken him into the natural and social sciences. His personal research focuses on how and why humans reason, think, and act the way they do. I'm really pleased to introduce Professor Christopher deCarlo.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. It's great to be back here again. I've seen a lot of familiar faces from years prior, and I've given a lot of different talks on a lot of different subjects. Today, as the title states, I'm going to talk about something called the systemic self, or essentially, trying to define fairness in a very complex universe. So, last year, you might have remembered I put forward the Mentos Moral Challenge. And I didn't think anybody would take it up because we really didn't kind of want to go that way. It was just basically stating how much money would it take you to basically strip down, to be naked, walk next door to the variety store and buy a pack of Mentos and come back. And the bidding started at $1 million, and most of you agreed to that, and then it got down further and further and further, and less of you and less of you and less of you were willing to do it, but I think somebody was up for about 20 bucks. I think we got to. Now, obviously this is a thought experiment, and philosophers like to use them, as we heard Ish say last night, philosophers like using thought experiments. And the reason why for this particular one is because it really allows us to consider what I call our upper moral limits. What are we willing to do or not do under certain given parameters and constraints? So essentially, if we were of a different time, different mind, frame of mind, period of time, the standards we have today might not be what they are. So we can imagine being in a society in a given period of time where the appearance of public nudity is not considered problematic at all. In fact, it might be the norm, to which case there would be no moral challenge whatsoever. They would look at us and think, what are you talking about? Well, of course I'll go and do that. It's no issue for me, right? So obviously it's complex systems, what we were talking about last night on the panel. I mentioned that there are these complex natural and cultural systems, and we'll look at them further later on, but they come together and basically they literally define who we are and how we define ourselves. So some audience members were not agreeable to the challenge at all, right? Irrespective of monetary amounts or fame or power or any of these types of things. None of them would get them to do this. And that's essentially a product of how they have defined themselves within that given challenge, within the context of that particular challenge. Now, for others, there's an agreeable price at which they're willing to break a particular law or violate a particular custom. And this essentially, to them, it's an agreeable price. It's considered to be fair. That sounds fair. How much would it take me to do that? And basically the remuneration for their behavior is something of a cost-benefit analysis. So what's it going to cost me to do this? Well, I'm going to have to be naked in front of the public. I'm going to have to expose myself. I might possibly get arrested for public indecency, whatever the laws are in this particular part of the world. But for me, you might decide, that's worth $1,500. That's worth $2,800. That's worth $3,750. Whatever your price happens to be, that's what you consider fairness in your particular sensibility to be, how you define yourself. Now, when we judge behavior, right, the idea of behavior, of people who are not acting fairly, what is it about their actions that make us feel the way we do? Basically, humans and other species have a built-in fairness detector. It's an interesting quality, right? I've been very much interested in this concept of fairness my entire academic career because, it's come at considerable consequence. The more I've tried to be fair in my life and academic personal life and those types of things, the more it tends to get you in trouble, right? Because, and many of us, just being Canadian, seem to have this capacity of wanting to be fair. You know, we're the blue helmets of the moral society that want the sides to get along, and right, and sorry about that, right? We try to get along, and what happens is sometimes that doesn't work so well, right? You can become the bad guy in trying to do what you consider to be the right thing. Now, when I was an undergrad philosopher, we studied Plato's Republic. And I don't know how many of you have read it or know much about it, but it's essentially an extended narrative on a discussion about what is justice. So a concept of fairness. The entire book is taken up with the character of Socrates talking to other different characters, Thrasymachus, Glaucon, others, as to what justice actually is. What would a just society be like? And various people offer their views as to what would be fair and what would be just. And then Socrates, in his own Socratic way, you know, the kind of John Stewart go on type of attitude, and then he walks them down the garden path and then shows them the fallacies to their reasoning and that sort of thing. But Plato, he had an interesting concept of justice and fairness. He said, one of the things, anyhow, was a suggestion of, if you really wanted a fair society, whenever you had children, they'd be taken from you and given to other couples, and you'd receive their kids. So you would raise them without knowing that they were yours, you see? So they couldn't get any favoritism in any way. I can't see that happening, right, anytime soon, because what Plato didn't realize was the evolutionary, genetic, various other types of attachments that we humans have for our offspring. Other kids are cute, in most cases, as babies, ugly as hell, but we say they're cute, not as cute as ours, and there's a reason for that. So that concept in a just society is just not going to fly. So for plenty of years, lots of social scientists, primatologists, anthropologists, and a few good philosophers have basically considered, you know, this notion of fairness in order to see how it influences and affects both us, right, and animal behavior. Because the concept of fairness, and I'm going to show you a clip, does not exist just within the human realm. There are other species out there that have concepts of proto-morality, of ethical systems, and many of them center around this concept of fairness. So I find it very, very deeply ingrained, so deeply ingrained in human and animal worlds that I see it as a cornerstone to all legal and moral codes of conduct. I really do think this concept of what we throw out there as fairness is instrumental in coming up with these systems. Now, I find it to be incredibly elusive in definition, but I still think we have to try. It's something we want. But if it is, then we're going to be forced to develop better methods for understanding the systems under which we are all influenced. One of my main purposes for writing this current book is to look at, if we want a just society, if we want a fair society, what type of information systems are we going to have to develop? Are we going to have to rely on in which to allow us to treat people with greater fairness? When we judge their behavior as good or bad, right or wrong, just or unjust, what system of information are we going to have to say, aha, this is what we're going to use, this is what's going to help as many people as possible? So, in so doing, what we can do is we can establish what I call our systemic selves. These are identities that define us, and they provide a clear understanding as to why we behave the way we do. Once we can better understand the systemic self of another human being, we're in a better position to gauge why it is they behave the way they do, and then to what extent we should approve or disapprove of their behavior according to the ways in which we define value within a society. And that will allow us to then treat people in a more just and fair manner. But it's going to take a lot of work, and it's not going to happen, I don't think, anytime soon. But I think we have to try. Now, just to show you historically how important fairness is, I have a number of quotations. And we're going to have like a little Jeopardy time here. So I'm going to put up a quotation, and if you know who said it, or if you think you know who said it, and some of them there's no way, and if you do, there's going to be a hell of a parting gift, right? Bill, tell them what they've won, right? So some of these are going to be far easier than others, right? Fair is foul, and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. Right. William Shakespeare. Capitalism is against the things that we say we believe in: democracy, freedom of choice, fairness. It's not about any of those things now. It's about protecting the wealthy and legalizing greed. Not bad for Karl Marx. Engels, think American, contemporary. Makes lots of documentaries. Michael Moore. Very good. In a democracy, someone who fails to get elected to office can always console himself with the thought that there was something not quite fair about it. This is a classic, but it's like a Jeopardy $2,000 question, right? Thucydides. Tough one, folks. The history of the Peloponnesian War. But a great quote, nonetheless. The aim of justice is to give everyone his due. Roman? No, Roman, that's Greek. Starts with a C. Who said it? Cicero. Good. Life is never fair, and perhaps it's a good thing for most of us that it is not. British, 19th century, witty, homosexual, yes, Oscar Wilde. As a religion, bilingualism is the god that failed. It has led to no fairness, produced no unity, and cost Canadian taxpayers untold millions. DeCarlo. No. When you see who it is, I'm not going to be happy. Your man in Ottawa. Life is not fair. Get used to it. Everybody's parents, essentially, yes, mom and dad, Bill Gates, right? So, what is the trouble with fairness? Lots of trouble, right? It's that, I define it this way, it's that overarching central quality of whose virtue we all acknowledge in the highest order in principle, but significantly less so in application, especially in matters dealing with our own vested interests, right? Yes. Thank you. These talks are always so much fun with you guys. Now, here's something interesting. When we talk about fairness, we have to consider to some degree rights and duties. And every year, when I teach my courses in ethics, I am always surprised at how little students in general, and the general public, know about terms like rights. When I say, what is a right? I ask, what is a right? What is a right? Well, right, I get to do stuff. Yeah, that's true. But the interesting thing about rights and duties and fairness is that they have a very unique relationship. Rights and duties come with entailments. There are logical entailments, and in this case, there are contractual entailments. And there are two types of duties, positive and negative. And this is basically how simple it works, and the majority of the world's population does not know what you're about to see right now. A negative right, if you and me and everyone in here has a negative right to be here, what that means is the rest of the population of Kamloops and surrounding areas owe us a duty of non-interference. That's literally what it means to have a negative right to us assemble here. So picketers can't come in here and say, imagine lots of religion, ours, right? They can't come in and disrupt this. They have to abide by an agreement, which we call a social contract, that allows us to be able to exercise our negative rights. Positive rights are stronger rights. In Canada, you have the right to free Medicare. That means you are owed a duty of assistance. It's not a duty of non-interference to allow you to do something. In this case, there's something you need, and another party or person owes you a duty of assistance. So when you get sick or injured, the government owes you, and the hospitals and so on, they owe you a duty of assistance. And this basically comes down to the idea of social contracts. It's an agreement. It's something we developed. It's something we put together. We know what the rules of the contract entail, and therefore when we exercise our rights, we have the power to say, this was owed to me, and when it's not, then you can say that was unfair, and there are means for which you can then make determinations as to how you're going to be compensated. So, agreements, policies, laws, customs, norms, these types of things. Now, the dominant maxim underneath all of these aspects of fairness, believe it or not, is the golden rule. And Christianity does not own the golden rule. It has existed far longer than any world religions or mythologies have been around. You see it in nature. You see, we call it reciprocity. And it's the idea of what goes around comes around. So it's this notion that, you know, as Christians maintain, do unto others as you would have done unto you. This exists not only in many different world religions, but it's one of the central foundations for humanist thought. It's one of the central foundations simply with other species as well. So it's not unique in any way to any particular religion, although it is a universal maxim that we all tend to share and we all tend to agree to. So it has a very universal capacity about it in terms of personal ideology. So the notion of reciprocity, this notion of quid pro quo, or what we now call tit for tat, is the idea that you give a certain amount, you get a certain amount in return, and vice versa. So what illustrates this aspect of fairness and reciprocity is something philosophers and economists have come together and developed called the ultimatum game. And to illustrate this, I'm going to need 2 volunteers. So we have you and you. You can actually stay right there. Yeah. This is relatively painless. Okay. Sir, your name is? Sean. Sean? Laura. Sean and Laura are our guinea pigs for this particular ultimatum game. And it's very basic. If I had more government funding, I would actually be using real money for this. But I don't. So it's imaginary money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Laura $100. You have to give some to Sean. If Sean doesn't like the amount that you give him, and he rejects it, you both get nothing. How much do you give Sean?
I've heard this game before. My husband's told me about not giving him nothing.
Does your husband say the same thing? Sean, she's giving you nothing? Accepting? Right. I mean, most people, their gut reaction would be no. And so you both get nothing. Right. Exactly. Sean, how much would it take for you to say, yep, I'm good? In your mind, do you have a figure? I'm thinking of a number, Sean. As low as $1. It's better than nothing. Exactly. Because that's your rational brain telling you that it's better than nothing. When I just did this in class on Tuesday, the girl said, she looked at the guy, 40 bucks. And he goes, that's what I'm worth? I'm worth 40 bucks? Screw you, we get nothing. And I said, okay, let's look at this in a different way. Let's say neither of you knew about the ultimatum game. And I came up to you and I gave you $60. I said, there you go. And I came up to you and I gave you $40. Is that a good thing? Yeah. Then why'd you reject it? Right? This inherent aspect of fairness. You were just given $100. Why should you get more than me? I would give you $50. Well, the other person might think, I don't care what you would give me. I want more. Rationally, Sean's right. You should accept $1, because at least you're coming out of here $1 more than otherwise. Right, so rationally, you figured out the ultimatum game. When this is done in various clinical settings, it's off the scale in terms of how many people, if it's below, say, $40 to $30, within that range, the spike goes up for them saying, forget it, we get nothing. So you really, it's kind of like cutting your nose off to spite your face, right? You're really just hurting yourself, but you're hurting that other person more because they were supposed to get more than you, right? So you've hurt them. So this tells us a lot about ourselves, that we have this kind of fairness detector within us. And we don't like how people cut in line, right? Turtles don't even like it. We're at an ATM or whatnot, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and then somebody comes in and says, hey, how's it going? And they just kind of do this. It's like, you know, the meters go off, and it's like, hey, you shouldn't do that. But if the guy's big and he could harm you or whatnot, you just kind of, you know, it's, oh well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I actually saw a really innovative way of cutting in line outside of Ryerson University, across the street at the Tim Hortons on Tuesday. Big lineup, go figure, Tim Hortons. Big lineup, and everybody's waiting. In comes this one guy. He does one of these. Oh, man. Ladies, right to the front of the line. How you doing? Good. What you ordering? Oh, a couple of coffees? I got it covered. Just let me cut up with you. And he does ting, 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 got his coffee, paid for theirs, and walked out. Is that fair? Is that fair? Right? That's a contract between them and him. But should the contract be for the rest of us? What if it was their friend? Hey, how you doing? Right? And they let the gentleman cut in line. So what? So you got to wait 7 seconds longer or whatever, right? What's the big deal? But for some people, they were looking at this guy like, what are you doing? And in their heads, they're thinking, why didn't I think of that? Why did I not do that, right? So here's an old Russian joke that shows you ethnically how the concept of a fairness detector works, okay? You have an American, a Frenchman, and a Russian. They're walking along a beach, and they come across this antique bottle, and they pull the top out, and a genie comes out. Genies do exist, you know that. And the genie says, I will offer you each one wish. The American says, easy. Give me a mansion in Santa Barbara. Done. And away he goes. And the Frenchman says, easy. Give me a mansion on the French Riviera. Done. And the Russian says, my neighbor has a goat and I don't have one. Kill my neighbor's goat. Right? And it is an actual joke, and it is an actual ethnic old Russian joke. But it does tell a lot, right? It tells a lot about, well, he's got one and I don't, so I'm going to even the score and I'm going to make things fair, right? Now, we know that there are aspects of fairness. We see it all the time, right? Pick on somebody your own size. We don't like bullying because we consider it to be unfair. We don't like the idea that religions are tax-free, that they get to make all kinds of money and that they don't have to pay a dime in taxes, right? And in terms of education, we can ask ourselves, well, what is fair? What is fair? What should we be, what material, what type of stuff should our kids be learning in primary, middle, and secondary schools? Just very quick update for you folks. For 5 years now, I have been lobbying to try to get critical thinking taught in high schools in the Ontario curriculum. In the last year, I've been meeting with the Minister of Education in Ontario, and she's finally given the thumbs up to a pilot project for standardized critical thinking in an Ontario high school system in our board, in the Upper Grand District School Board. And the reason, what's that? Public. But I will work on the Catholic board as well. But right now, we're just going to go with the public board. It seems to be the easiest. And of course, the reason why this is important, and it's standardized critical thinking schools, because for 5 years I've been pitching this, and I don't know if you know what the catchphrase is. Oh, we teach critical thinking. And I said, to some degree you do. but it'll be buffet, right? It'll be a la carte kind of critical thinking. One teacher will teach something, another teacher will teach something else. It's not standardized. And the rules for critical thinking are standard. I didn't make them up, right? The rules of logic are consistent. They're like mathematics in many ways. If you violate them, you can easily see contradictions and inconsistencies. You know what evidence should be. You know what fallacies are. You need to know that arguments have specific structures. Basically, the first part of my book, right, the ABCs of critical thinking, that's going to be the template for what will be taught in this pilot project. If it's successful, it goes to the rest of the high schools in Ontario. If that's successful, then we start to look at the other provinces for adopting something similar. What does this do? It generates fairness to every student who will learn the same principles of critical thinking and use the same principles of critical thinking, which puts them all on the same playing field. It levels the playing field. It allows them to have greater efficacy in communication and discussions. It has greater cohesion when they go into post-secondary education, into colleges and universities, or the trades or whatever. And ultimately, it will make them better citizens, we hope, because they have a greater means with which to communicate and to understand that even if we're going to disagree about key issues, we can get along while disagreeing and be civilized human beings. So I think it has far-reaching effects, but it's central, based on the concept of fairness. Can't get away from this concept. We know the difference between the 1%ers and the 99%ers. If there's a 1%er here, can I see at the break? Because I need some philanthropic interest for some of my research projects that are actually based on this, right? Seeing somebody more qualified than you get promoted, right? You work harder, but you don't get further, right? For nepotistic or other irrelevant reasons, whatever. So we see a lot of this happening. The cheaters and the cooperators. Right? We have Ben Johnson. If you're Canadian, you know what happened. I can remember the night of the race for the gold medal in the Olympics. I was at a stag for a friend of mine, and we were waiting for it to come on. And a buddy of ours who was a coach, a former track star in Canada, and a coach at Western University, we're already, we're looking at it, they're warming up, they're doing this stuff, right? And he goes, this is back in the 80s, right? And he goes, you see those 8 guys? Yeah. They're all juiced. And we laughed at him. Steroids are for bodybuilders. These guys just need to run fast. They don't need any juice. Boy, was he right. Every one of those competitors with Ben Johnson, every one of them was on steroids or some performance-enhancing drug. He got caught, right? How fair was it that they strip his gold medal, right? When in fact, we now know how rampant drug use can be in people who deny it and deny it and deny it and test clean, right? 1919, Chicago White Sox, 8 men conspired to throw the World Series. Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding, you remember the infamous assault. You love to hate Bernie Madoff, right? The NSA, right? How fair is it to have your privacy infringed upon? And you might know who these people are. The Americans are going, who the hell are these people, right? So senators get paid a good deal of money. Their job is not that difficult. And yet they run up enormous bills for expenses. Now, before we judge too harshly, I'm just wondering if we were in the driver's seat, how many of us would have done this, right? Thinking, we deserve it. We're important people. We help Canada, right? We deserve a little extra, right, from the trough. Why not? So it's difficult for some of us to judge and then say, well, they shouldn't have taken more money than what was deservingly theirs. That was unfair. But don't forget, folks, all of us are cooperators and cheaters. At some point in our lives, we have not abided by certain norms of conduct, rules, even laws to some degree. So, who wants inexpensive, great-tasting coffee? I do. Okay, how are we going to get it? So here's what I say to my class. I see kids walking in with Starbucks coffee, Williams, Second Cup, Tim's, all kinds of different types of coffees. And they're sitting there drinking that, and I say, okay, what did you pay for that? $3.50, $2.75, $1.90, whatever. I say, okay. Here's a good example of the difference between cheaters and cooperators and how it benefits everybody to be a cooperator. Okay. Let's say this is a class, and we all love coffee. And what we can do is we can purchase our own machine for $10 a person, easily, even if this were a much smaller class. And then we could purchase all the coffee. And then on a regular basis, every time you came to class, all you had to do was pay $0.25 for a cup of coffee, because that continues the funding to buy future coffee. Every now and then, somebody's going to have to fill the thing full of water, whatever. There's a cup there with money, you know, and then, oh, it's empty. Okay, it's my turn. I'll go out. I'll get the water. I'll come back. So there's a bit of a cost involved to us, but the benefit is huge. This will only work if we all cooperate. So as long as we cooperate, every time we come to class, we know we're going to get a very good cup of coffee for $0.25. And then a cheater comes along and sees this and says, $0.25 for a cup of coffee? I don't think so. But there's money here, so I'll take that. And I'm going to grab a free cup of coffee, and I'm going to steal the coffee machine. The cheater has done extremely well in comparison to the cooperators. But look who loses. Because of a single cheater, we lose. He does really well. The rest of us suffer because of a lone cheater. Now, keep this in mind. In terms of fairness, cooperation actually gets you more of what you want. This is key to remember. When you cooperate, you get more of what you want, in many cases, most cases like this, than going it alone. Because if everybody went alone and kept buying their coffee from different places, you would not do nearly as well as if you cooperated in this manner. So, fairness, entitlement, and privilege. Here's a paper, Higher Social Class Predicts Increased Unethical Behavior, by these folks here. And they did 7 studies. And what they did is they looked at upper class individuals who behaved more unethically than lower class individuals. Some of you may have heard about this study. Here's the description of it, and here it is in action, basically. So what they did is they have a student here coming to a crosswalk in California, and you have a vehicle approaching. They're there, they're clearly there, and the a-hole in the beamer just goes right through, right? And what they found was that more people who drove higher-end cars broke the law more than those who didn't. And the hypothesis is the concept of privilege. And when they interviewed some of these people about their wealth, about their resource management, that sort of thing, many of them felt as though they earned it, they earned the right, and that their time is more important. This person's got to get somewhere. So just wait, because they're more important than you are. So you're just going to have to wait, even if it costs you potential safety. So how fair is that? Well, you have resources. Does that really mean, you know, you have an advantage over me and you ought to treat other people in this way? So the studies show, should not suggest that all wealthy people, by any stretch of the imagination, suffer from head-up-ass syndrome. Some do, there's no question about it, but not all of them. That would be an unfair generalization. What the studies did show was a significant difference between those who drove higher-end cars and their patterns of behavior. So, it does suggest this correlation between resource accumulation and unfair treatment of others. Now, so then what do we do with people who break the rules, right? Well, obviously, treat them fairly. How do we do that? By understanding the constraints under which they broke the rules. Why did you break the rules, right? This will lead to fair retribution and hopefully reintegration of these people as cooperators. So we go back to the guy who stole the coffee maker and we talk to him and we say, why did you do that? Because I wanted to. No, that's not an argument. Give me an argument. Why did you do that? Because I could. It's only wrong if you get caught, right? That's how a lot of people feel. Certainly many of the cheaters I just showed you were doing what they did, knowing in many cases what they were doing was wrong, but they didn't admit to it, right, until they got caught. So I developed this OzTalk project, which is a system of information in the hopes that I can create a repository of information that has been gained in a less biased manner, so that when you wish to retrieve information from this particular system, you get it filtered through a manner in which you remove a lot of political and vested interests from it. So no matter what you want, you're not going to be able to have it politically influenced. I'm dealing with Ryerson University now to host this project in the hopes that we can try to create a system of information where we take all of the measures that we can possibly muster to make it as least biased as possible. Because bias is what reduces fairness. Vested interest is what reduces fairness. Privilege, all of those things. So if you want to treat people fairly, you have to get your information from a system which itself is fair. And in order to do that, you have to reduce the bias that puts the information in the first place. I really do believe humans value fairness. And they value it so much that they would want this type of information system. Like, I don't know, the Senate should have a system like this. No parties involved whatsoever if you're in the Senate, right? You can't have an affiliation. That's too much of a bias. But if you develop an information system and you deliberately limit the bias, then the information you get is where you can begin. It doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all, but it can be the starting point for information. So I've shown you this before. It's basically a conglomerate of two sets of systems. Natural systems, here's you. And what are you but a conglomerate of systems? Skeletal, endocrine, neural, respiratory, all of those types of systems. And we look at them in their component parts. They go from the cellular, right, to the molecular, to the atomic. And we keep breaking things down and further and further and further components. And then when you go up the scale, we're into ecosystems across the entire planet, which is in a planetary system, which is in a galaxy, which is in a cluster of galaxies, and then all space-time. So here in a single view, we see ourselves as it relates to all natural systems. And then in terms of cultural systems, we are meshed in, here we are again, in all kinds of cultural systems. Our family, our ethnicity, we have education, economics, politics, morality, agriculture, religion, business, law, medicine, sports, transportation, communication, and the arts and humanities. So lots and lots and lots of cultural systems. You put the two of them together, and what do you get? Something I call the OzTalk project, the onion skin theory of knowledge, which is what? It's a model of information where the main ideas and subjects on the perimeter of the onion go deeper into the onion to give us depth of information. But all of these systems are interconnected. So we have to develop a complex networking system that shows how all of those systems, as you go deeper in, also have a breadth of information throughout the onion as well. And the way in which we can understand what I call causal clusters of how all of those systems, we can pick the ones that are specific to the problem we happen to be working on at any given time. And then we get the information from a least biased information system. That's the fairest way we're going to be able to treat people. But we have to have a system, something like this. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but it's going to be something like this. And that's if, as members of this world community, we value fairness. If we don't, screw it. Just every person for themselves. We can do whatever we want. But if we do value fairness, this is the type of model I believe we're going to have to develop at some point. It's extremely complex. Yes, it's reductionist. Yes, it's materialist. And we and every other species then are system navigators. We're determined, but from a determined point of view, like we're on a raft, we try to navigate through those various systems to attain the types of things we tend to value most. You came and attended this conference. In order to do so, you had to navigate through a number of systems. You either flew here, walked here, crawled here, cycled here, drove here, whatever. But you had to get here. In order to do that, you had to navigate through a number of different types of cultural systems. Your health had to be at a certain level, right? All of these factors were coming into play. Sometimes we exploit these systems to our benefit, right? In light of what we perceive to be value. And sometimes when they're exploited, they can be unfair. And when they're unfair, that's why we need a type of information system that allows us to think about human actions and how we should treat the rule breakers when this happens. So, obviously to others this can seem unfair. Now, when we look at the Ostock and we consider how other species behave, it can reveal that the concept of fairness is not a uniquely human quality at all. So I'm going to bring this up. And I don't know if you have the sound up on this.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did.
So Franz de Waal, primatologist, Emory University, works with bonobos and whatnot. One of his former students, Sarah Brosnan, is working with capuchin monkeys, and it's going to demonstrate how the concept of fairness exists in other species. You have two capuchin monkeys side by side in a cage. They have to perform a task. When they perform a task, they receive a reward. When you make that reward unequal between the two, you'll notice.
This has now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees. But with Sarah Brosnan, we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, it's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
So, Could the monkey be thinking something different? I don't know. But it seemed to be a pretty clear indication that the one on the left realized something wasn't quite right. But did you notice the thinking process that the female on the left did? Took the rock, banged it on the wall as if, okay, is this right? This is what I'm supposed to give you, right? And I get the grape. So they looked for anomalies in behavior. That's pretty abstract thinking, right? So, rush hour traffic is my personal horrific experience throughout the week traveling on North America's busiest highways, the 400 corridor. The 401 leading from Milton into Toronto and Scarborough into Toronto and Barrie into Toronto are the busiest highways in North America from 6 a.m. till 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. till 7 p.m. And what happens is you get a lot of volume, and it creates what I call undulating idiots. So it's stop, and then they go, and then stop, and then they go, and then stop. And so that causes this huge snake-like effect. And so you probably have experienced this, and some of you may have even been the cheaters involved in driving in terms of fairness, where I always leave two car lengths between me and the person in front of me so that I can try to coast so I don't have to come to a complete stop. And sure enough, zip, somebody will come in, to which I'll leave 2 car lengths, right? And there's just no way of overcoming this. So what I thought was, I considered the Ostakt, and I came upon this idea. Do you folks know what murmuration is? Have you ever seen starlings? I have a thing. I'm not gonna play it because we don't have time, but the starlings all flock together like this, and it looks amazing when you see it. You'll see fish in schools do it as well. And it's basically, in that case, with starlings, protection against peregrine falcons, things like that. But the fact of the matter is, you don't see the starlings doing this, and then boom, 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 they just keep falling out of the sky, right? They don't hit each other, but they're incredibly close to each other. The science behind murmuration, I think, might be useful in application for rush hour traffic, right? Because it's a very simple algorithm. It's a very basic thing. Each starling, relative to its position within the flight, within the flock, is always a certain distance apart from the other ones. And it works in a level of 6 starlings around 1. It's always a 7 starling kind of algorithmic combination. Take similar ideas, apply them to human fairness situations, and you make it a rule on the 401, okay, that you can never be closer than 2 car lengths to the car in front of you, and don't change lanes. Okay? Just don't do that. This will work, right? I'm meeting with a head person. This is what philosophers do if they're any good. They actually come up with ideas and say, well, could this make the world better in some respects? Well, how would I do that? Well, you get on the phone and you call these people, and you tell them who you are, and you present your ideas. So I'm meeting with this gentleman, and think about it. It's the opposite to fluid mechanics. When you put your thumb over the hose, it goes faster. The water comes out faster. When you narrow arteries in driving, everyone goes slower. So it has kind of the opposite effect. But however, if you put together a rule, you always have to leave 2 car lengths, no matter what speed you're doing, like in terms of rush hour, not on regular when some guy's doing 140 and you're trying to keep up with them or whatnot. But generally when it's, honey, 2 car lengths, catch up. In rush hour traffic, if you stay 2 car lengths behind and don't lane hop, just stay where you are, okay? And everybody agrees to that, you will get to where you want to go faster. If everybody cooperates, everybody does better. What's going to wreck it? Cheaters. So we have to police the cheaters. So what am I doing? Job creation. Summer students put them in Ministry of Transportation cars with the orange lights, and have them literally drive during rush hour periods along those corridors. You have educational, promotional commercials, public service announcements saying, if you really want to get to where you want to go faster, right, then stop suffering from HUAS and follow this algorithm, and you will, and everyone else will. But if you cheat, that's not going to happen. So it would take education on the one hand to let people know, yeah, that would work, right? In theory, we see it work in the animal kingdom. In practice, it would work. Getting people to actually do it is the tough part. Even though it's for their own benefit, it might be a very difficult thing for us to get people to do. Oh, good. Good. Yes. Do they have lots of money? Google? No. So now, who are we as our systemic selves, right? Who are we? To figure out this, you don't have to close your eyes. I always found that flaky whenever people said, okay, let's just close our eyes. It's a nice, quiet place. Right? No. If it helps, that's okay. But to figure out who you are in terms of your systemic self, right? You have to imagine what you are, how you got here, why you're here, and the time in history that you're here. Imagine this in relation to all of the natural and cultural systems which contributed to your being here today. Everything that brought you to be here today. Move from your kind of proximal here and now to kind of the ultimate expanse of our known universe. It's kind of like a form of meditation where you can internalize all the systems, breaking it down to their component parts that make up all of the matter that makes you now, and then going back out and seeing yourself existing in a cultural system here, and then a larger ecological system out in the world, and then a planetary system, right, and then a galaxy system, to get a sense of how connected you are at any given time. And the more relations of systems you can identify with your being here now, the more you will come to understand what I call your systemic self. And it follows that the greater we can understand these aspects about anyone at any given time, the fairer we can treat them. So what are the ramifications? Well, for law, now we can better understand why a person would break the rules, ethical systems, mental health issues for sure, economics, education, foreign policies, in general, the management of human and natural resources. If we're able to understand humans on this systemic level, and information then as a model in that same manner from that complex network of a systemic level, the fairer we will be able to treat. So my bottom line, to be fair, we must understand our systemic selves. Thank you.